Hello, previously we looked at less mixing. Today we are going to build on top of this. Let's look at functions in less. So in less, functions are built-in utilities that perform operations on values such as colors, numbers, strings, and lists. And it is used to also automate repetitive tasks and create more complex styles in LESS CSS. For example, let's take a look on color functions. So to create a color function, I can say, for example, base color, create a variable for base color, and then I'll give it, so this is our blue color. Then we can put class for lighten version of blue. Let's say lighten blue, and then give it a background color. Then we shall say lighten, and then the base color. Here we give it the percentage of light that we want, which is going to be like 20% or 30% whatsoever. So we shall add a semicolon there. We can do the same to the dark one. So we say darken blue. So let's say, then we can say background color, darken, then this color, and then we give the percentage. How dark should it be? Let's say 20% darker. Now let's see this in action. I'll go to my HTML file and I'll create H1 and call it light, another H1 and call it dark. Then I'll give it a class of the CSS that we use. Then we do this. So let's open our terminal and then watch the compiler. So that is what you have. So you can see that is how the colors will show up, the darker, the lighter one. So when I go back to my less and I make it 30% darker, you can see the color changes. Or if I make it 50% lighter, you see it almost goes to nothing. So I'll put it to 20% and keep this to 20%. Oh, perfect. Now let's look at the mix functions. The mix functions, we can just say, for example, we create a variable for color 1. Let's choose that color. Then color 2, let's give it a reddish color. And then here we can say the mix example, for example, and I'll give it a background color and call it mix. Then I'll put color 1, comma, color 2, comma, and then I give it a percentage. For example, let's say 50%. We expect this to give us 50%. So let's copy this class and go to our index and create something. Let's say H1 again. Just call it mix color. Then I'll give it a class, which is a mix example. Now you can see this is the mixture of the two colors that we came up with. You can just come and play around with the percentage here. Let's say 40% of the mix. You can see that. And I say 60% of the mix. You can see that. So you just have to play around with the percentage. Now let's look at math functions in less. Now we can just use basic arithmetic operations to manipulate numeric values in less. This is because less will allow you to perform even mathematical operations like add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So let me give you an example. I'll create a variable called base padding, and then I'll give it 10 pixels. Then here I'll say add and subtract. It's an example. So let me make it example. Then here we can do padding, and we say base padding. Then I say plus 5 pixels. Now I am going to add this class somewhere, our HTML, so we can see the effect. So I'll add a div class here, give it that class, and then I'll put all this inside the div, so you can see that everything is padded. Then we can also subtract it. We can say margin, and then we say base padding minus 3 pixels, and you see that. Basically, that is how to use math functions. So let's look at string functions in less. Once you understand these basics, it will be easy for you to build an entire thing. Once you get how these functions work and how these variables work. So with string functions, it will allow you to manipulate strings, which are text strings. And those are like things like replace, escape, etc. An example. I'll create a variable and call it base URL. And here I'll add a URL. Let's get a URL here. So I'll say example.com. So this has to be a string since we are working with string functions. So I'll just put quotations there. Now perfect. Then I can just use the replace. And then from here, let's make it a class with a dot. From here, I can just do background image, and then I'll get a URL, and then get the replace function, then replace it with the base URL, which is right here. We replace it with @base URL slash the image.jpg whatsoever. So this has to be before, and I'll put it in quotes, that, and then I'll close the quotes here. Then I'll say comma, put in the image there, and then the photo. This will produce a URL. Instead of this, it will produce a URL called example.com.photos. All right, so now let's use list functions. We can just say at list, and then we say item 1, item 2, then item 3. And then we can say dot length example. We shall say content, length, then list, at list. We expect this to return 3. So when we run this individually, it should be able to return a value which is 3. So with functions in LESS, you can play around with custom functions, and also you use it to manipulate styles dynamically and efficiently by using color, math, string, and list functions. I have a blog version of all this series, and be sure that you check out my blog. I'll link each of that in the description so that you also have access to each of these example of codes that we have been playing around with. So in the next video, I'll be showing you how to use classes in LESS.